What if one of the biggest threats to your success isn't fear, self doubt, or lack of confidence, but too much confidence? In this episode, I sit down with Jared Tendler, the trusted mental game coach behind PGA Tour winners, world champion poker players, traders, executives, and elite performers around the world. And we explore one of the most common and least recognized performance killers among high achievers: overconfidence. We unpack why success often plants the seeds of future failure, how overconfidence quietly erodes discipline, preparation, and decision making, and why most people never realize it's happening until they're stuck in a spiral of frustration, anger, and self doubt. Jared Tendler is an internationally recognized mental game coach with over 20 years of experience. His clients span 45 countries and include world champion poker players, PGA and LPGA Tour winners, executives, entrepreneurs, and institutional as well as independent financial traders. He's also one hell of an author. He's written multiple highly acclaimed books, including The Mental Game of Trading, The Mental Game of Poker, Volumes 1 and 2, and his latest book, Everyday Golf Psychology. This is a full circle moment for me personally. When I was playing poker professionally, I read all of Jared's content on poker. In fact, in preparation for this conversation, I brought both of The Mental Game of Poker, Volume 1 and 2 out to review, and each of those books was filled with index cards, notes in the margins, and several sticky notes throughout. You're going to learn a tremendous amount in today's conversation. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Jared, you've spent 2 decades studying high performers across golf, poker, trading, entrepreneurship. And I'm curious to know, in those clients you've worked with who've already had a taste of success, what's one of the most destructive patterns you've seen holding them back from getting to that next level?
Thanks, Paul. You're making me feel old with the 2 decade thing, but no, it's good to be here. Also, overconfidence, by far the biggest one.
Hmm.
I say that because players, athletes get a taste of success. Athletes sometimes harder to, but at times we're all kind of in a pocket where things are going quite well, and sometimes the next step feels like it's inevitable that you're going to take it. Sometimes there's a sense of momentum that gets built up, but the momentum is somewhat results based, not always necessarily process based. And what can happen is an erosion kind of beneath your feet where there are, some slight rationalizations as to why you're not, kind of nailed in terms of your preparation, right? You're getting there a little bit late, maybe kind of half-assing things a little bit. And, in the near term, things don't get punished because there is either some momentum behind you. If you're a trader, there's some market-based things behind you. If you're a golfer, right, you can get a little bit lucky too.
Mhm.
But that erosion eventually is going to get punished. And what happens when it does is generally kind of where things fall apart quite rapidly and where the big kind of ups and downs occur. So overconfidence, general society exists in around, 60 to 80% of people in general. That does not mean that you're outwardly arrogant or boastful. To me, overconfidence is
Mm.
very simply believing something that is untrue. Generally, it's untrue about the future. We're making projections and predictions with more absolute certainty, whereas poker players and day traders especially are making probabilistic bets.
Yeah.
Golfers at PGA Tour level, they're doing the same thing for the most part, right? They're making high probability decisions, but that probability starts to fade and turn into determinism, where what you believe is going to happen is what's going to happen in your mind, and that is the
Yeah.
sort of most basic version of overconfidence.
I love that you made the distinction. It's not always an outward production or projection of arrogance or this brash confidence. Sometimes it's inner quietude of confidence. And if I'm hearing you correctly, it's almost beginning to assume that because things are going so well now, they're going to continue to. Yet simultaneously, like you mentioned, the mind begins to rationalize why it's okay or safe to start taking shortcuts or to start pulling back on some of those core fundamentals that created success in the first place.
Yeah, because if you like, the mind is built for efficiency, the brain is built for
Mhm.
efficiency. As human beings, we're built for efficiency. So if you believe that the outcomes you're envisioning are going to happen, you're going to win this event, you're going to make $1 million this year, you're going to win this poker tournament, uh, then it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense why you would be as buttoned up in terms of your discipline, why you would be as focused
Mm,
and as prepared, as diligent with your work ethic. That would actually be irrational coming from that belief, right? So, the efficiency is, well, I'm going to get what I want, so I don't have to work as hard. That actually makes sense.
really well said. Something I've always thought and put into practice with myself and my clients is there's almost existing what I call a lag effect. Today, all of my results are a byproduct of what I've been doing, whether we say 30, 60, 90 days from now. And again, kind of just digging into what I'm hearing between the lines with what you're saying is we start to have this success, we start to take our foot off the gas, but we're still riding that wave of momentum from doing everything we're supposed to be doing. But once we kind of cross that threshold, that's when that dip or that fall off occurs.
Yeah, and I think, again, depending on what industry you're talking about, like in golf, it can last a little bit longer. In poker or
Yeah.
trading, it tends not to because the frequency rates are so high, where
Yeah.
the degradation process is gonna get
Mhm.
punished pretty quickly. Um, so yeah, as soon as you take your foot off the gas pedal, something in your decision making is now worse. Doesn't mean it's gonna be
Mm,
punished. If you're a poker player, a trader, a golfer who is incredibly well skilled, you can get away with that for quite a while. And the drop off doesn't have to be that severe. Again, the question becomes when you hit a pretty squirrely shot, right? You get on a tough golf hole where there is more trouble right, and you end up hitting it a little bit too far right because you're trying to cut a corner or whatever, right? Trying to be a little bit over aggressive, and then it gets punished in a big way. So now you all of a sudden make a big number. Or as a trader, you end up putting on a little bit too much size, right? And market kind of whipsaws, you don't have a stop in there, right? Things get big, bad quickly. Then again, it's the shock, which oftentimes
mm.
rapidly translates into anger. And then the anger spiral, downwards is generally the kind of the predictable kind of next steps.
So when you're working with a client and they're coming to you because they're stuck in that spiral and they've just finally become aware of it, or you're noticing that they're trending that direction, what are the first action steps you take to help stop that spiral and bring them back to a place of composure and control?
First thing is we got to figure out what caused it. And a lot of times that means
Mm,
getting them tuned into the fact that they were overconfident. Again, it doesn't always happen that way, but very often it does. Overconfident to begin with. It, it's it's very, very difficult for people to recover from cycles like this that have happened repetitively when they don't know what's causing it. Because at a certain
yeah.
point, like, you're not going to just like pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and stick your chin out if you're going to get whacked or punched in the exact same way again, and you're not really sure kind of where those landmines are. It makes sense to have a little bit more frustration, a little bit more kind of a feeling of being overwhelmed by the situation.
Mm,
'Cause, again, I talk about this actually in a recent blog where it's very easy to kind of get lost, in the forest in a sense, right? You can't see the
yeah.
forest for the trees. You are simultaneously trying to problem solve while you're also embedded in the problem, right? It
Mm,
oftentimes requires a third person perspective. And you can do that individually through journaling, through writing, taking breaks. But when you're in the heat of it, it's difficult to kind of zoom out and properly analyze a problem that you haven't been able to solve yet. If it's a repetitive problem that you have an answer for, and it's just a question of like kind of finding what pieces to fit together. Well, then that's easy to nail down. But for a lot of the clients that come to me, they don't see the overconfidence as being what tripped them up. They're only
mm,
kind of immersed in the anger. And I mean, it's 1,000 to one of people that come to me when they're in a great spot versus when they're pissed off, tilted, lost a lot of confidence, paralyzed by fear, or
yeah.
whatever the smaller versions of their own crap is. That's when they come because it's a more obvious problem. So few people are like, "All right, I'm doing awesome. I don't want to mess it up, or I want to keep it going." Back to your original question. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the first thing to do. Then we can start to analyze. Okay, well, why and how did that get off, and we can start to kind of map their individual version of overconfidence. So take the
Mm,
golfer who has a couple good holes in a row. And all of a sudden now their pace walking to that next tee box quickens, right?
mhm.
Or the opposite. They're actually, got a low number on the horizon and now they start to slow down. They become a little bit more kind of perfectionistic, kind of not wanting to mess it up. But either way, right, there are physical, mental, emotional, cognitive markers,
Yeah.
right? Changes in thinking, changes in decision making, changes in tempo or pacing, Same thing with traders, same thing with poker players. Everybody has their own individual patterning. That we got to kind of find, what those markers of overconfidence are so you can prevent it the next time around. But then, yes, we got to deal directly with the anger. The anger is a secondary part of the problem, but it's still a major
Yes.
one. But the same principles kind of apply. We got to understand the causality, what has changed, and a lot of times it's in this instance, that bubble bursts,
Hmm.
and you're kind of angrily trying to get back to the position that you were before, right? Whether you were, had a good round going and you're pissed off trying to force good scores, force back money, uh,
Hmm.
but you're trying to get back to where you were, and that directionally is not how human nature is designed. Right? We don't have transportation vehicles that can take us back in time. So to get back to the position that you were in is a functional impossibility,
Hmm.
and yet our minds kind of want, wish, and hope for that to occur, and that's the biggest problem. So it's kind of changing perspective of, all right, look, here this has happened. It's probably happened for the 10th time. Now we've got to use our experience and figure out how to A, avoid the overconfidence, B, when it
Yeah.
does trip you up, how can you recognize it without responding with such kind of vitriol and anger about the situation or about whatever mistakes you believe that you've made.
I love how you called out. I think that's what you just said. I'm going to repeat it in a moment. Speaks to so many listeners that so many people get trapped trying to problem solve while they're in the problem. And I'm gonna misquote this, but I believe it was Einstein who said something like, "You can't solve a problem from the same state or condition the problem was created." And you started to allude to, that's where journaling or some form of a reflection practice or having coaching outside accountability comes into play. What advice would you offer to the listener who's really relating to that, to create that distance, that new space, to take action, to begin getting that outside 30,000 foot view on the problem to better be able to solve it?
I mean, writing is the best way to do that. I think if you're not somebody that has had a journaling practice, you don't have to call it journaling if that feels too woo woo or psychobabbly. Just call it note taking about what's going on in your mind.
Hmm.
And I'd say the early kind of purpose of the journaling or the note taking is to define a very clear problem statement. You don't even have to know what's causing it. But if I've seen nothing in my, 20 plus years of coaching,
I
it's that
got you
when
there.
people come for coaching and they're raising their hand. Now, this is just those that have recognized the problem. Even they struggle to cleanly articulate what the problem is. They can talk about what's happening, right? I'm playing really well for 12 holes, yada yada yada. I end up, making things worse. It's like, okay, well, but the yada yada is where the secret sauce is. Like, what's going on? Are you, you know, getting overconfident? Are you getting tired and distracted? And is there, you know, instances where you're getting frustrated over some mistakes, some bad holes or just bad luck? I mean, what specifically is happening? You go to the doctor and you tell the doctor you're not feeling well, and he said, "Oh, yeah, you're sick." And you're like, "What? Like sick? What? No, like what's wrong with me?" He's like, "Well, you're sick." That's not like a diagnosis. So to be able to cleanly articulate what is the problem, it should not be underestimated. And so
Yeah.
the beginning of this is just like writing down like what's happening, what's going on in your mind, what are the situations where you're having difficulty, what are the triggers? Do you think what is sort of sparking the problem or the emotional reaction or the sort of negative thinking or the distractions? Then you kind of start to look at it, become like puzzle pieces in a sense. And then as
Yes.
you establish more of those puzzle pieces, a picture starts to emerge of,
Hmm.
okay, when I'm on the ninth hole, I've marked down my score as I make the turn, and that feels like it's a whole new nine, whether it was a good nine or a bad nine. But then I get to the 10th hole, and it's now I'm like more hyper focused on score. Well, no shit, you weren't really paying attention to it until you marked down your score. Like a simple thing can now all of a sudden
Yeah.
take you from having a really strong focus on your execution, on sensing what's going on the golf course, adjusting to the golf swing that you have that day, to now you kind of mark down a score, and now all of a sudden you want to your mind is just naturally kind of anchored to that more. Could be as simple as that, but
Yeah.
there's lots of problems. But that writing, that journaling becomes a way of creating that separation, aside from hiring somebody to help you do it.
I agree. I'm so biased to journaling. It's revolutionized my thought process, my emotional regulation and processing. But something I've observed personally, I've told my listeners thousands of times, for the first 3 decades of my life, I was emotionally constipated. I couldn't articulate how I was feeling. And that anxiety and stress was pressure, it was a badge of honor. Have you too, in your experience, noticed, most men struggle to articulate how they feel? They can't actually put some emotions or vocabulary to what it is they're feeling. And if so, how do you help them begin to build that emotional awareness and intelligence?
Yes, and like anything with practice,
Mm,
so it is a misnomer to think that it is an inborn trait that cannot be trained. Whether you have a predisposition to be more sensitive and more tuned in is neither here nor there. Regardless, you
yeah,
can always get better because it's a skill like anything else. So whether you are emotionally constipated or whether you're just completely tuned out, dial toned,
yeah.
there's seemingly nothing there. You can always start somewhere. Now, uh, if you're struggling, let's say you're the kind of prototypical guy who, just kind of stuffs emotions in a closet, puts them away, and the way you can begin recognizing their presence in real time is to recognize the instances where your mind starts to create rationalizations, where you start to
Mm,
deflect, where clearly there's something changed in your decision making. Uh, you know, again, physical signs, right? You're pacing, you might get a little bit tenser, maybe you get quieter, maybe your thoughts start racing. There are signs and signals
yep.
that they exist. Now, once you kind of recognize those moments where something has deviated, like in the moment in real time, you may not always have the ability to do that. So I would, very quickly kind of make a note on your scorecard. If you're trading, you can kind of mark the situation with a timestamp. Obviously, if you're trading, you're generally going to do it on a computer. You can make a note down somewhere else. Same thing with poker. And then come back to those moments when you're done. Right.
Yes.
I think it can be difficult at the end of an 18-hole round of golf to be able to like kind of very quickly kind of pinpoint where there are some important moments to zoom in on and start to expand and recognize some of that emotional patterning. Same thing with trading poker. Like there's very intense endeavors, but you
Yeah.
just kind of create those little timestamps in your mind or moments in time. And then look, you come back to it, reflect on it, you're like, man, I have no idea. It's like, okay, fine. But you've begun to create a data point, right? You've indicated to your mind that you want to get
Mm,
better at this. And what's going to happen is you're naturally going to start to collect information subconsciously uh,
yeah.
around those moments, whether you're aware of it or not. And then over time, right, you keep kind of doing this. It becomes really really hard not to improve in some respects. Is it happening as fast as you want? Well, that may be or may not be, but then just add more time.
Absolutely. So if we continue with the example I shared, where they are completely emotionally unaware, ill-equipped to label, diagnose, feel, articulate their emotions. Like I love what you distinguish in your, I believe it was your first book, The Mental Game of Poker. There's this distinction between, emotional reactions and what you call emotional accumulation, where I've seen it a lot in my work. These, hard charging, ambitious professionals, they've become so numb to their emotions. They're incredibly skilled at repressing that. Really what happens is when they hit that metaphorical rock bottom or emotional implosion, it's the result of accumulated past emotions, not something particularly that was so intense in the present moment. Can you speak to this a little bit more in terms of what is this emotional accumulation, and ultimately what can we do to avoid reacting to emotions from the past?
So I think the first thing is to just like reformat, I think, our view of what emotion is. I think a lot of
Mm,
men and a lot of people in general think of emotion as a bad thing. And they think of it as like a extraneous, data points that aren't necessarily relevant. I view, and I've become more convinced that this is a large part of it. Um, we can think of emotion as a sensory organ of sorts, right?
mm,
And so, and I'll explain why that we are not born knowing who we are. We're not born knowing the world, right? We go and interact and we experience, right? We use our raw senses to experience the world in a lot of ways. Now, in order to figure out what we like and don't like, well, that's a lot of emotion is involved, right? Like there's joy and excitement and there's pain, sadness, sorrow, disappointment, right, etc. around things that we don't like or not as interested in. There's boredom and disinterest, right? There's emotions that kind of help us to navigate and orient
Yeah.
ourselves as we're interacting with all these things that we do. So here we are, right? You love golf, you love poker, you love trading, you love business, you like love these things that you do, and emotions have helped to get you there. Now, from a performance standpoint, when we look at anger or fear or overconfidence or disinterest or boredom, they may be occurring at times that are suboptimal, right? You're getting pissed off at times that you shouldn't. You're getting bored at times that you should. Now, why is that occurring? It's occurring because you have a faulty view of the situation. There's a flaw,
Mm,
there's a bias, there's a wish, there's an illusion, there's some hope. There's something there that is, kind of incompatible with how you want to think, right? So you have this illusion of control, for example. You have this perfectionism that you're bringing into any of these endeavors. And so when things are going well, obviously there's, good feedback that goes along with that. But when they start going poorly, your version of perfectionism or your illusion of control um, makes you feel like you should have more control over the outcome than you actually do. So
yeah.
now all of a sudden frustration comes up, or some anxiety or some loss of confidence becomes the signal of
Mm-hmm.
that illusion of control or perfectionism or high expectations, or there's lots of these things that we're trying to
Yeah.
dig out. So the sense that you have and the emotion that you're picking up on is much less important than its ability to help you orient to the flaw, bias, or wish that's actually producing that emotion in the first place. So if we label emotions as bad, then you tune out that underlying, you know, uh, disc, disc, uh, the you kind of tune out that element of yourself that is reacting to the situation in a way that it
Yeah.
shouldn't. And so again, we use our emotions to figure that out. But if you're somebody who has been tuned out for a long time, the emotion has accumulated around this problem.
Yeah.
So over time, right, you're not kind of truly reset day over day. That frustration, will say, around an illusion of control means that you should never make mistakes, means that you should have control over outcomes that are not firmly in your control, especially given variance and the luck factor in the short term. And so, day over day, around that particular flaw, more emotion gets built up and built up. And the mind, right, has to have more strength in order to block it out. But, the mind is functionally less powerful than our emotions. And so, eventually, that dam kind of breaks.
Yeah. I was gonna say, boom, that's the implosion, whatever it may be. You said something interesting. Talk to us a little bit more about boredom or loss of focus, because I've observed that a lot in my clients across all types of industries, from pokers to day traders to CEOs and leaders. They say that they got bored in a moment where they had an opportunity to capitalize, get ahead, whatever it may be. What have you observed as, whether it be the emotion, the pattern, or the belief underneath that boredom or supposed loss of focus, responsible for that?
So it obviously can be part of the overconfidence that we talked about already.
Uh-huh.
But it also can be a sense of ease, uh, where a lot of high performers, they love the challenge. When
Yeah.
that challenge seems to have kind of faded away, well, then it becomes harder to sustain that focus. They lose sight of the bigger goals and objectives that they have because they want that challenge. They want that tussle. A lot of traders, in particular, have a very difficult time when they're doing well, when the game is seemingly quite easy, right?
Yeah.
It's much more comforting for them to have the challenge, and so there is a confidence component to this where there becomes a much greater connection to your past experience, wisdom, knowledge, experience, skills that you've built up, because there at no point should feel like anything is easy in an unconnected way. At all points, it should feel like I made this easy because of my
Mm.
experience and work and skills. Like, it's the output of it. I as a coach, right? I'd say the easiest thing I can describe in terms of how I've gotten better in the last 20 years, it's speed to diagnosis, right? Speed to
Mhm.
analysis. Like, I can analyze something that used to take me like 4 to 6 sessions, sometimes in 5 minutes, right? And so that ability, right, is to me very easy, but it didn't come out of nothing, and I'm always connected to understanding how I got here. So
Yeah.
again, these high performers, right? They feel that sense of ease disconnected from anything. And that actually
Mhm.
becomes symptomatic of an additional problems that they have, which their confidence is generally going to be off. It's not just that boredom and disinterest is an issue. It's that something is off in their confidence. They need that tussle. They need that kind of pain
Yes.
at times to have a sense orientation, if that makes sense,
Okay. Mhm.
right? Um, a lot of people, right, need something to kind of orient themselves around, right? And they need that feedback. And for a lot of high performers, they it's the challenge, it's the pursuit, it's the sweat, it's the blood that they're, like eh, releasing, right? In terms of the effort, right, that makes them feel like they know that they're doing the right thing. And when things get to be too easy, they lose that sense of orientation and it feels wrong, right? The ease feels wrong, and that's why they get bored. Because
So
it's yeah.
two follow-ups then. Would you say in your experience the high performers, like the best of the best athletes, traders, everything in between you've worked with, are more addicted to winning or the stress that the challenge provides?
So I'll just push back on the term addiction, just
Okay.
because um, addiction in my world has an implication on having extraneous costs that are going to have happen in their life. Right? There's a cost that comes to my effort and obsessiveness, or my intense work ethic, or whatever we want
Hmm.
to call that.
Yep.
So what I'll say though is, like, are they more driven to win, or are they more driven to avoid losing? And for the most part, it's the avoid losing, and
Hmm.
that's a Daniel Kahneman, phenomenon of
Yeah.
prospect theory.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not a law of human nature. Not everybody is that way, but generally speaking, I would say it's a bit easier to want to not lose than it is to want to win and dominate. That's why, for a large measure, we see so few dynasties and so few individual professionals dominate for long periods of time, because it can't just be the avoidance of losing that's going to propel you, to that next level. It has to be a more pure motivational drive to either be the absolute best, to
Mhm.
dominate, to want to crush other people's dreams and souls. Like, there's lots of ways that you can, kind of formulate the mixture of that motivational drive. But yeah, to me, it's a little bit lazy, honestly, to rely on the
Hmm.
avoidance of losing and pain. And I say that purposely because most people that
Yeah.
are,
Tell me more.
yeah, most people that who are that way would not consider themselves to be lazy, and yet they're motivationally lazy, in my opinion.
Hmm. Now, for somebody who is so, whether we say committed, obsessed about their craft, becoming the best at what they respectfully do, I imagine you've seen it, I've seen it, where their entire identity becomes enmeshed in their results. And more often than not, there may be periods of their journey where they lose themselves in the quest for achieving whatever it is. How do you help somebody who has lost themselves, lost their purpose, their identity, letting that process of perfection or the process of winning consume them, get back to who they are and why they started in the first place?
See, and they use that phrase because, again, it's so common, right? Get back to who they are. I'd say that that's not directionally the goal, the direction we're
Hmm.
heading, right? We're not trying to get back, because in order for you to get lost in the first place,
Hmm.
there was instability that existed prior to that kind of dive down deeper
Yep.
into the action, the game, the sport, um, in a way that was not optimal.
Yeah.
So, like, why did things get lost in the first place? Same deal. Like, we're going to kind of analyze where that inflection kind of shifted, and sometimes it can be personal issues, right?
Hmm.
Maybe there's a death or an illness. There was a sense that, like, it's now or never, right? There's a timing, especially if you're an athlete. You can't do this physically forever. If you're a poker player or day trader, sometimes there can be market-based forces that kind of force your hand, or at least make you think that. I mean, I've been hearing poker is going to die for decades. Um, yep. Same thing with trading, especially the algos coming in, and AI now. It's like there's going to be ways to make money for the end of time, and in those endeavors. So long as there are people still willing to play. Um, so the point being, uh, like, what's gonna kind of drive, or what kind of drives that dive downwards? A lot of times it's a taking for granted of the
Mm,
individual aspects of your character, your personality, your skills, your wisdom that just, kind of go unknown. There's an amnesia of sorts, and it's not
mm,
uncommon. It's called expert induced amnesia, but the same thing applies on a personal level too. Right? We learn a lot about ourselves through the interaction with these games, with these things that we do. Um,
yeah.
like I said, we're not born knowing who we are, so we got to go do a bunch of stuff to learn about ourselves. But then along the way, sometimes people get so sucked into what they do, and that becomes how they know themselves. That becomes how they can again maintain that orientation of, oh, I'm a hard worker. I'm very honest. I'm incredibly skilled. Uh, am resourceful. Have the ability to figure out, like, you know diagnose certain issues, and if I don't know
Mhm,
how the answer, I can kind of go find them. Like, there's a bunch of skills and things that we have in poker trading, etc. Um, eh, that if we're not doing those things, we kind of forget. So we become obsessed or connected to the activity to
mhm.
remember who we are, or to remember the core of our character. So it's not a very complicated task. You just got to spend time going back into your personal experience to, be able to describe, like, more about your character, more about who you are, more about what matters to you. What are your values? What are your goals? What are your interests? And the interests can still be, you know, game oriented, right? I love golf because of the endless complexity, the challenge, the puzzle that it is,
Mhm.
the creativity, the logic and order, the systemization, the ability to kind of practice and get good feedback, and to learn and
Yeah.
to grow. Like, there's lots of things that these activities provide us. But when you start to strip away and say, all right, you know what, you can never play poker again, you can never play golf again. Who are you? What do you care about? What do you want in this world? Uh, what are your goals? What are your interests? Right? Nail that down, and now you create a point of orientation that's going to prevent you from ever getting lost. Now you get to sort of choose how you're going to devote your and allocate your time, and you might remain as obsessed and in love with any of these activities as you were before, but you're not going to do so out of a lacking, out of an obsessiveness.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be now more of a choice.
Yes. So rather than the phrasing coming back to yourself, am I hearing correctly that maybe the better verbiage based on the model you used is almost like a reorientation or a reconnection? Like, how would you say that in your words versus how I shared it?
Yeah, I would say it's becoming more conscious and
Hmm.
ultimately unconscious in a good way, meaning like
Yes.
trained, right? Skilled, like that kind of deep unconscious competence or
Hmm.
mastery. You're becoming first conscious of all those aspects of yourself, right?
Yeah.
They exist. Some of them are known, but they don't necessarily stick. Um, Others are not known, and they need to be, because you are looking for something in poker, trading, golf, etc., that you already have,
Yeah. It's within
and you
you.
continue to look
Mm.
for it, but it's already there. So you're just becoming aware of what's already. We're not making up or creating anything new. I just
Hmm.
want you to not be amnesic anymore and kind of wake up like, Goldie Hawn and Overboard.
Yeah, and we're speaking, with this, we're speaking the same truth with a slightly different way of saying it. Because what I have observed, even me personally, like I'm coming out of the other end of a challenging period of time, and my verbiage would be, I kind of got away from some of the core tenets, principles, rituals, and routines that made me who I am, and I stopped operating from my core values, if you will. And for me, it's been about a return. I use again the expression coming back to myself. It just reorientated myself to my values, what makes me me, what brings me the joy, the fulfillment, and I lost sight of that for a little while. So it was coming back through reflection, through time, space, mentorship that allowed me to see again, oh, yeah, this is what lights me up. This is what gives me the energy and the excitement to tackle the day. And by resuming that, because I became aware of it again, I've been able to redirect and get, back on track, if you will.
Sure. So so we've all had the experience where we've watched a movie multiple times. Now,
Hmm.
if you've done that over different parts of your life, you'll see different things in that movie.
Hmm.
And that's why I say directionally, it's like you're not going back to yourself. You're
Yeah.
coming to it with a fresh lens because you've had a whole
Yeah.
new group of experiences that may have been a divergence away from, kind of what you thought you knew was correct. And so now
Yeah.
as you come back to it, you're coming back to it with a fresh set of eyes. See, are you really
Yeah.
coming back to it or are you watching it again? And I think that's, again, I think just directionally, it helps to create the orientation so that we're not viewing what we did over the prior months as being something that was wrong
Like insignificant.
or insignificant.
Yeah.
It's all a collective, like, we're just going through a complicated maze. You hit dead ends. And if you don't treat it, or if you feel like, all right, well, now I'm coming back to this center point that's going to help me get to the next step. If we view it as a coming back, then I think in your mind, you're viewing either that like dead end and the time you spent hitting that dead end as a waste, which is
Hmm.
inaccurate because there's value there, right?
Hmm.
Or there's actual knowledge that you're then losing, right? And you're
Yeah.
going to make those mistakes again. And
Great distinction.
again, I think directionally it helps us to see, okay, look, I'm not happy with the outcomes here. No, I'm not saying be delusional. Be like, all right, you know what? Like, I tried to change my golf swing, right? And the way I changed my golf swing, I could hit some shots better, but now I've got like a much bigger slice. I lost my draw, you know, and I can hit the ball straight. I can hit the ball. I can fade it also, but I can't really hit the draw. And then my misses are worse now. So I spent, a year trying to build this new golf swing, and man, like I'm not happy with where I'm at now. Okay, I promise you, you have learned way more about your golf swing than you ever knew before. Okay,
Yeah.
now are you going to find your way back to that old golf swing? No, you're not.
Mm-mm.
Right, because when you get back to swinging the club that way, you're going to be able to have the sort of muscle memory, right? The
Hmm.
knowledge to keep it there more consistently. And you're athletically going to have the ability to start to shape different shots that you couldn't do before. So you're not going back to the old swing. You're coming back to a motor pattern that was there with fresh set, but now kind of bracketed in a way that's going to keep it tighter, more consistent. But it might be a little bit of a pain in the ass to get you back there, right? Get you there again to find that kind of swing, but it's going to be way more consistent and solid once you do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think in your answer, you really embody just the importance of the obvious low hanging fruit of the necessity of having a growth mindset to become the best version of you. And then realizing every chapter of your life, every experience is a learning lesson if you so choose to view it that way. And yes, you might hit a dead end. I love your maze analogy, but there's always something to learn to bring forward with you. But Jared, perhaps the hardest question I may ask you today: what movie do you think you have watched the most over your lifetime?
There's a lot of them. Goodwill Hunting is up there though.
Oh, okay.
That one a bunch. Shawshank. Uh,
Okay.
those are the two most that are coming to mind right now. I mean, there's a
Mine's
lot of movies I've watched.
Shooter.
I mean, Spaceballs also I've watched a ton, but that's maybe less learning in that one.
Yeah, I think mine is Shooter with a good Mark Wahlberg. I can't think of anything. I've seen the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potters many, many times as well, but I think
Yep.
Shooter probably takes the cake. So let me shift gears a little bit here. And I understand your answer to this question might be something we've talked about, but if there's something else that stands out, please elaborate. A lot of your clients externally outward, they look successful, they look composed, they look like they're checking all the boxes to do what they're supposed to live this incredible life, but they're obviously coming to you because they want help, they need coaching, they see the value. What is internally happening for these successful individuals that other people don't see?
I would say the uber successful from the middling trying to break through, their reaction to weakness, failure, setbacks is fundamentally different.
Tell
And
us more.
the easiest way to describe it is the uber successful, they implicitly understand that their weaknesses, failures, setbacks are like kind of what's going to help propel them to the next level because they are
Yeah.
um, insanely driven to continue to improve, to excel, to dominate, to win, etc., or to not lose. And anything that stands in their way is going to be examined, looked at, corrected, polished, refined, eliminated.
Hmm.
And so if they or overreact to a mistake or a setback or a failure, well, then that just slows the time with which they're going to deal with it. If they deny or ignore it, well, then that's actually the biggest threat out there. It's no longer their opponents. It's now that they have this kind of gap that they're not really examining. And so again, the difference between them and not everybody else, but again, a large chunk of those who are kind of in that middle range trying to break through is that they have far more reactions to mistakes, failures, setbacks. They feel maybe like a piece of their character. I'm a failure. I'm never going to make it. There are big questions in their minds that then get reinforced
Yeah.
by mistakes, failures, setbacks. And so again, it's like you've got kind of this pre-existing weakness, but the fact that you're overreacting to it tells you that the weakness is there, right?
Uh,
And yet you're kind of allowing, although allowing is a little bit of a fuzzy term. You're not examining that overreaction with precision. You're believing that what you're experiencing is true. You are a failure. Now this is the thing that's going to hold you back. You're never going to be able to get over it. And then you're able to move on shortly thereafter. But that weakness is not examined enough. So then, as you start to have success again, well, now you're certain that you're going to reach the next level, and you become overconfident because you're compensating for that pre-existing weakness.
mm,
And I know this can be a bit complicated for those that are trying to do this for themselves. But the summary answer here is uh, mistakes are viewed from your own perspective, right? And I would argue that any mistake that you make has an answer to it, right? You may
mhm,
not know what that answer is, but take a decision-making error. I actually just saw a friend of mine who was posting on X about not qualifying for this golf tournament, was close, played really well, but made a bunch of decision-making errors on the course. Like, okay, well, you're gonna closely look at those. Are you gonna closely look at let's say the instances where I'll assume where you're a bit over aggressive, right? Aiming at flags that were just a little bit too risky because of where they were kind of perched. Um, and you could say, okay, well, don't do that. We're going to play smarter, right? But that's not really the antidote, right? It's like, why in that situation were you compelled? Because at this point, I know him well enough. He knows what playing smart is. Most of the listeners here, you know what it means to play smart. And I'm not saying don't be aggressive at times, right? It's about kind of picking your spots, right? Where does it make sense to, right? When you're out of position, not the time to be aggressive. You're in position, like, yeah, you want to fire a flag, have at it. If you know that your short game, is really good out of rough versus fairway, like some golfers really, really struggle with tight, thin lies. So like
mhm,
if there's a huge, kind of fairway chipping area over the green to this tight flag, like you damn well better not be aiming at that flag. Right? But if there's a a lot of rough that, is not real thick and it's like, yeah, okay, well, if it plays to your strength, it's not being as aggressive, right? My point here
yeah,
though is uh, when you analyze the mistake, you're trying to figure out why you made the mistake, not just what the mistake was. And that's a fundamental shift for a lot of people because
yeah,
it's easy to know what you did wrong, and then you want to very rapidly come up with the answer. Like, oh, okay, don't do that. Just play smarter. Or as a trader, don't you just got to sit in your hands and wait for the entry criteria to hit, and then get in. Like, okay, but why did it happen in the first place? Well, I see the price action dancing around, and I don't want to miss out. I don't want to miss it. Or, the golfers like, well, I've had a few holes where I feel like I should have gotten more out of it. Right. I made
yeah,
a bogey on a par five. I, missed a 5-footer for birdie or for par. Right. And just like a couple holes recently have been just a little bit off. So then all of a sudden on the next hole, right, your decision making gets a little more aggressive. So the answer is not play smarter. The answer is react differently, handle those moments where things are not going as well, or
mm,
at least be aware that if that's occurring, then your decision making is most likely to start to be affected. And you got to be aware of it so you can make a distinct correction.
okay.
But the correction is not play smarter. The correction is handle the situation differently.
You've used a variation of the word, I'm just looking at it on my notes, of reflection, examination, assessment, analysis throughout our conversation. When it comes to building a reflection process, I have my own, that I coach my clients on. Like I think reflection is so critical. You've alluded to it. Tangibly speaking, for somebody listening, who's drawn to your suggestion at the journaling or however they want to label the writing down of their feelings, thoughts, and emotions, what role does reflection play in your clients' lives or your lives to make sure they're not missing some of the key learning lessons and takeaways from their experiences?
Well, we can be assured that they will miss key learnings and lessons. I think the goal for anybody that's just getting started with this is just start. I mean, take 1 minute, and
Yeah.
after you're done with your day of business, day at work, right? Time with your kids, time with playing golf, like things that you care about getting better at. Right? Our minds have a natural ability to digest and process information. You don't have to do anything to kind of massage that along. But the things that you want to make that process go a little bit more efficiently, then start with 1 minute at the end of the round, sitting in your car, back of the scorecard, have a separate notebook if you need to, whatever, or on your phone, even open up an audio recording or a voice note, like make it as easy as possible. But the key is to do it often, right? That's why I say 1 minute. It's far less about the totality of the content that you come up with, and much more about the frequency with which you engage with it. Right? If you will get way more out of spending. So I mean, golf can be difficult sometimes because the feedback loops are a little bit longer than they are with poker players, traders, or business people. Where like if you're playing golf every day, well then yes. If you're trading every day, well it's easy. You're
Yeah.
playing golf like 2 or 3 times a week, same deal, just time horizon gets longer. But like, imagine, 5 days a week, every day you practice or play golf, or after every day at work, you spend 1 minute doing this, and I'll explain what this is in a second. You're going to get way more out of. So we'll just assume that it's a total of like 20 minutes over the course of a month. You'll get
Yeah.
way more out of it than spending 1 hour at the end of the month. Like not even close. Okay. So what you're doing very simply is you can note what you did well, and you can note, you know, instances where, emotions creeped up, decision making wavered, and then just the beginnings of kind of why that occurred. Now, you might be surprised by noting the things that you did well, but most people suck at recognizing the things they do well. And the reality is, any progress you're going to make is coming on top of a foundation of strength, right? It's coming on top of the foundation of the things you're already good at, right? You're a 20 handicap golfer. If you're going to become a 15, you're going to, chop those shots away on top of the existing skills you have in your short game and your driving with your wedge play. Like the betterment doesn't come out of nothing. So when you're solely focused on weakness, it's easy to not, it's easy to miss the very simple, like natural organic improvements because you want to get better. The more times you recognize what you're doing well, guess what? Your mind's going to want to do more of that. Not that freaking complicated. It really is not.
I can't tell you. So for all my golfing clients in particular, but all my clients have a variation. Like for golf, it's an after round report. It's a couple questions rooted in that well, better, learned, a couple unique questions to them. I can't tell you how often my clients will skip the what went well or not give me three things. And I'm just like, start here. That I tell them the research, the science of you've got to train yourself to find the positives, the strengths. So I'm happy, overjoyed to hear you echo that because
Yeah,
I will share that episode
so
with them.
we can be pragmatic about it, right? Because there's the like, okay, so why has that pattern predominated?
Mhm.
And if it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. In this case, they're probably perfectionists. They have very high expectations of themselves, and so when that uh, problem, and I'll say that problem exists, you get no credit from that kind of lens or perspective from what you do well. You get 0 points in a sense, and
Yeah.
so it makes no sense on a subconscious level for them to pay attention to the positives because the negatives are the threat. Uh,
Hmm.
so the thing we're correcting is trying to round out the perfectionism and the high expectations and treating it truly as not a double-edged sword, but as a sword that you're using, kind of towards the things you want to improve at, not
Yeah.
one that ends up having the self-inflicted wounds. Like again, the elite of the elite, they have that dual balance where they're simultaneously driven for perfection, understanding full well that they will always have imperfection. And
Hmm.
they view imperfection not as a threat, but as an opportunity. And that, right, again, is where the middlings struggle. Like they view the imperfection as the threat when it's an opportunity. And if that's difficult to wrap your mind around, well, then we've got to dig a little bit deeper into the origin of that. And sometimes it might be because you have been a perfectionist or one that has high expectations for a very long time. And whether or not there's any kind of emotional accumulation or not, just the sheer habit of repetition means that you suck at it. And then therein lies the nature or the necessity for the training.
For those of you listening, those last 3 to 4 minutes, absolute gold. Really well said. I love how you articulated that. I want to niche down a bit more in our conversation. You just published another book. I mean, you feel like you're just pumping out one incredible book after the next. So kudos to you. Everyday Golf Psychology. And what stood out to me, and I think was probably one of the core tenets of your book, of course, I don't want to speak for you, is that everybody says golf is X amount percent mental. And a lot of your book talks about challenging the idea that golf is 90% mental. Why do you think that phrase has become so widely accepted, and why do you disagree with it?
Widely accepted because a lot of prominent people have said that it is. Now,
Hmm.
they mostly are professionals or those in the upper end, um, and they again are in that expert induced amnesia. They don't know what it took to actually develop a lot of their skills, or they forget, and so they're now kind of examining the game from their position of dominance and
Yeah.
saying, "Look, for me to play my best, it really is a mental endeavor," and that's pretty accurate, right? But that's not golf. That's
Yeah. Not
their
for me.
version of golf. Yeah, not for most people. I mean, like so I played golf for 40 almost 40 years now. Um, Played in college. After college, went to grad school. Went from playing 100 rounds a year to 12. Um, you know, then kind of started to ramp up again. Playing high level golf again. Actually, the best golf of my life. You know, uh, but then they've got like a desk job and sitting in a chair and wife, kids, etc. And all of a sudden now, in my early 40s, spine compresses. My swing speed goes from 118 to 106. It's like
Mm,
you can't mental game your way out of that, right? I've been working intensively with a personal trainer who's really a PT to increase mobility, functionality, strength. I'm back up to 113, 114, hitting the ball farther than ever, right? Thank you, technology. But in terms of like the strength, I mean, my golf swing is better than it ever has been in life. That is not a mental thing, right? The mentality might have been like, oh, well, the persistence to be able to kind of do that work, to the perspective to understand that, that's what was needed. But my point is like, golf is fundamentally a physical sport. You do not hit the golf ball with your mind. There's no amount of mental effort that can make you a better golfer if you are physically incapable of doing things with your golf swing. It's not possible. So it's a sport. It's a physical sport, first and foremost. Now, the mind is an incredible tool to get the most out of what you have, right? It's an incredible tool to help you get more of what you want, right? To
yeah.
much as I was just describing for myself. Um, but it is not 90% mental. That is a fallacy. And I think in large measure has made many golfers feel overwhelmed by this part of the game when it does not need to be overwhelming. It can make it very practical and approachable. And I will say that it's taken me a very long time to make that as practical and approachable as possible. Um,
Yeah.
so if golf is 90% mental, um, the only place where that is the case is at your worst. Okay? When you are at your
Mm,
worst, doing the things that you know you should not, whether it be decision making or with your swing, it's not
yeah.
a knowledge issue, right? You know what you should be doing in your golf swing. You know what decisions you should and should not be making. And yet, if they continue to happen, it's because you don't have enough energy or you've got too much emotion. There's only two reasons,
Yep.
right? It's a performance stress curve, Yerkes Dodson law, like that is it. Now, what causes that and why that happens, well, that goes back to a lot of our conversation today. But that's
Yeah.
where the game is mostly mental. Now, on the PGA Tour, no, the game is still not mostly mental. Okay. Rory and Scotty and the best of the best, like they're they're in a different league in many dimensions of their golf swing, in their knowledge of the golf course, in their knowledge of themselves, how they dissect and make decisions. And then of course, obviously, Rory's just more of a freak in terms of what he can actually do with the golf ball and with the swing. But yeah, you look at like top to bottom from the best players in the world to top 200. Like you give a top 200 player, or like let's say the 200th best player in the world, the best mentality in the world. They are not instantly the number one players in the world, right? They will steadily climb up, and then maybe as a result of that, they're able to get more experience and tighten their golf swing and make things more repeatable. But like, it's still not 90% mental at all instances, right? There's a lot more to the game, and if we really subscribe to that 90% mental thesis, you're basically saying equipment, physicality, strategy, technique account for 10% of the game. The hell are we talking about? It is absurd to me, and I'm shocked that it hasn't been called out as a bunch of BS sooner than that.
So you're listening right now and you're feeling called out or spoken directly to. Maybe this is also a kick in the ass reminder to go actually put in more practice in the technical work and not just binge every single podcast and YouTube video or TikTok or reel on this new mental game tactic you need.
Yeah, or to blame your mentality, because it may not be. Now, again, I'm not saying don't do the work, but there's not a single golfer on the planet that's spending 90% of their time working on their mentality. It just, no one does. And it's because they shouldn't. Now, they're probably not practicing in the most efficient way. Now, there is, I would argue, a big myth out there, especially with golf, that if you're just grinding on the range, right, that all of that should instantly translate over. That is one of the biggest issues that golfers have, which is, I think, why they think the game is so mental. But it's not a mental problem. It's a failure in understanding how to translate skills from a practice environment where there is no consequence, or at
Yeah.
least there's not consequence in the environment. There has to be consequence baked into yourself. When I
Yeah.
go practice, I can tell you that I am pissed off when I, you know, uh, don't have my alignment, like my alignment is not set up properly. Or when I, make some kind of basic errors in terms of how I'm positioning my setup, or like, so I bake in a lot of consequence because I know if I allow poor fundamentals on the range, well, then it's guaranteed to happen on the golf course. Guaranteed to happen. So point is, you have to bake in more consequence to your practice because the environment is not going to provide it for you. And that is a fundamental element to how to translate, kind of more of that practice on a technical physical level, to the golf course. It's not always a mental thing that is the difference.
Really well said. I know for everybody listening, you're going to have significant consequences if you do not go purchase Jared's book. Again, I'll put it in the link below. It's on Amazon. It's everywhere. Everyday Golf Psychology. Jared, let me get you out of here on this. For somebody listening today who knows they're capable of more, but is becoming more and more aware they're getting in their own way, they're stuck despite feeling like they're doing all the right things, where do you direct them to look first to make positive changes?
To the why. Yeah, you may feel like you're doing all the right things, but if you were, well, then you'd have the results that you want. It's, again, if it quacks like a duck. So the way that you're problem solving is the problem, right? The way that you're viewing the situation is the problem. So that's why you take a step back and you ask yourself, why is it that I'm not getting the results that I want? Like, you just can't kind of keep banging your head up against the wall. And the why might be you don't know. And that's where a book like mine can be helpful. That's where talking with a good instructor can be helpful. Um, yeah, I mean, the answers are not always in the mental game. I'll give you one example where there's a massive mental benefit to something technical. And I talk about this in the book, but I want to call it out because it's kind of buried and not so obvious. Every golfer should have a troubleshooting plan for their golf swing, right? When I go play, if I'm hitting certain types of shots, I know exactly what adjustments I need to make. And you can imagine that provides a lot of comfort, a lot of confidence, takes away a lot of fear, a lot of pressure. And so if you don't have one, well, then go to a swing instructor, not to overhaul your swing. Okay. Just to ask them, how do I make my existing swing more reliable? And why do I hit X, Y, and Z shots on the golf course? And if they don't give that to you, because some instructors are going to want to try to change your swing, you cannot allow them to do that. Okay, you have to be the more savvy consumer here. Okay, but you're being very, very clear about what you're asking. And if they can't give it to you,
Uh,
just literally walk out of the set. I don't. You have to.
uh,
You cannot allow them to start to change your golf swing. Okay, the adjustments you're going to make are going to mostly be fundamentals, right? It's probably not your grip unless your grip does change a lot in how you're moving throughout the round. It's probably more like it's like your alignment and ball position, and a lot of that. Like it could be posture related, but it's going to be fundamentals.
yeah.
They need to help you figure out kind of that troubleshooting plan, and it will give you a lot of confidence and maybe answer your original question.
Really well said. I'll link your book below, of course, but where can everybody listening go to connect with you, learn from you, get your blog, and learn more about working with you?
Yeah, jaredtendler.com. And I also do have a free golf community that I'm kind of just starting to ramp up here. So if you have specific
Yes.
golfing problems that you want to me to address, there's more information on the website on that.
Fantastic. Jared, what an incredible conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. A lot of fun. Enjoyed it.
What a phenomenal conversation. I hope that you felt challenged. I hope that you felt inspired to consider a different perspective or viewpoint. I hope you feel motivated to examine yourself, your patterns, your mistakes, your errors in terms of thinking and problem solving. As Jared discussed, there is so much opportunity found within self examination, awareness, and a consistent reflection practice. I'm grateful that you decided to tune in to another episode of the Unstuck High Performer podcast. My two asks are simple. Share this episode. There is somebody in your circle who you know is quietly struggling, quietly exhausted, out of alignment, and desperately seeking some form of support. May this episode and conversation be the wake up call they need to take action. And if there's a part of you that felt a bit agitated, stirred, energy got moving as you listened to what it is Jared and I discussed, take that seriously and let it be a sign that it's time to take action. Reach out to Jared, inquire more about working with him. Or if my approach resonates with you, reach out to me. Use the link in the show notes below to apply for one-on-one private coaching so that you can finally get unstuck and better lock in and ultimately level up. Thank you for tuning in today. Make today great, and I'll catch you in the next episode.